What made you decide to be a composer, and when did you start composing?
Well, music is something that I've always done, even from a very young age. Some of my earliest memories are sitting around a campfire singing songs with my father playing guitar. And I have two brothers, one older and one younger, and we were all musical growing up. I looked up to my older brother quite a bit growing up. He was a piano player. And, as it goes with siblings, younger siblings are always kind of looking up. And my brother inspired me a lot in terms of playing the piano, writing songs, that kind of thing. And later on, I was pursuing a career as a double bassist, as a performer here in Los Angeles. And I was getting opportunities to write music for various creative projects, dance companies, short films, that kind of thing. And I really was excited by the creative potentials in that. And so really kind of started to move my career in that direction in terms of writing music. It really was when I was in my 20s, which, if you kind of think about the traditional trajectory for a young composer, that's a pretty late start. In fact, I didn't really start seriously studying composition until my 30s. And so I guess that's one thing that's a little bit different about my path. But there are advantages to it as well. I mean, I bring to my work a great deal of my my experience as a performer. When I'm composing music, I'm really thinking about what it is to be performing it, and I think the performers actually really respond well to that perspective.
Nice. Okay, so how would you describe your composition style, and what are your preferred choice of materials and topics?
If I were to try to do a rundown of my musical uh, genealogy, it would involve everything from playing in orchestras to performing in punk bands, salsa to jazz, just about just about anything and everything. And this is actually something that I really enjoy about music, is kind of inhabiting different personalities. At least that's how it was as a performer. It's hard to kind of make an assessment as to how that all kind of comes into the mix of what I do now. And I actually try not to think about it too much. I try to kind of allow that synthesis to occur naturally. But what I can say is that there are threads throughout music, threads throughout different styles of music, in terms of how good music basically is structured and put together in a sound way. And I think all of those various influences kind of uh, come into manifestation whenever I sit down to write a piece of music. And I feel much more kind of comfortable with that process now than I think I ever have. When you're in school and you're studying and doing a lot of things, you're collecting a lot of information, and you're often not sure what it is that you want to use and how you're supposed to use it, and you're thinking about what other people think you're supposed to be doing. And I'm finally in a place now where I just feel comfortable with what I want to say and how I want to say it. And so it's really kind of a post modern thing where anything really can go. And I will pull from Ligeti, I'll pull from Reich, I'll pull from Count Basie, or um, Bjork, or uh, you know, I'm really not. I'm really not elitist in how I choose the materials that I decide to use.
Okay, what is your approach to tonality? Like, what's your language?
Word I would use, the adjective I would use is abstracting. It doesn't mean that I write a lot of really kind of out there stuff. If you listen to a lot of my music, a lot of it actually has a strong sense of tonic and tonal center. A lot of it's very consonant and has a beauty aesthetic to it. But
Yeah.
my again, it's the way that I approach tonality is really more of a reflection of how I feel I'm engaging it internally as I'm listening to music. And as a composer, we learn how to kind of composers hopefully learn how to kind of break things down and deconstruct things and learn how to reconstruct them in interesting ways. And so I guess when I think about tonal language, I'm really using it in more constructivist realms. If you think of Cubist paintings or that kind of thing. So I don't particularly enjoy writing a lot of really dissonant, difficult sounding music, but I also don't. Uh, I also seek to try to keep things interesting in how I utilize tonal materials when they're utilized. I don't always utilize them.
Where and when do you get inspired the most? There are some composers who say, in the bathroom they have, when they're showering, they have a lot of ideas. So how about you?
Yeah, the showering thing is interesting. It happens to me too. I think that has something to do with you're in a place where you're relaxed, obviously, and you're able to kind of unleash those cognitive blocks. In terms of what inspires me, more and more I see music as a means of understanding my place in the world and expressing my understanding of the world. And the projects that really excite me are the projects where I can kind of get out of myself, honestly, a little bit, and try to put myself in an unfamiliar place, an unfamiliar position. And the music is a way of kind of expressing my experience in that, if that makes any sense. And I'm always wanting to think about the performer. I'm always wanting to think about what they're experiencing, and it is a reflection of my impressions of them as people and as artists. And there's something about that that is really gratifying for me. I really enjoy how art provides an opportunity for us to step outside of ourselves. It's always a lens. It's always my subjective viewpoint. But it's more meaningful to me when it's a lens for understanding the world. And sound just in general is the way in which I understand the world. I'm very tuned in to the sound world, whether I'm out in the country and I'm hearing animals and birds, or if I'm in a cityscape. Sound, for that matter, the way that people speak, speech prosody and inflection of speech and the musical traits in speech. Sound is really the way that I am able to kind of navigate my sense of understanding and also purpose, kind of in this lifetime, I guess. So
the audience has a wide range of music training and appreciation, and some people find classical music daunting and contemporary classical even more daunting. So, do you strive to address different interests? Do you ever have to compromise your artistic taste for accessibility?
Honestly, it's something that I don't really think about at this stage, in terms of what I'm seeking to accomplish with my work. I think it's easy to be very strategic in our thinking about things. As we're trying to develop our careers and trying to gain notoriety in the world and all of that. I'm trying to move more away from that way of thinking and really just try to be more centered in the work that I'm doing. And that what comes with that is a decision to not make decisions based on what I feel the perception will be in the audience. Now, at the same time, I'm not one of these composers who thinks that the audience is irrelevant, and I am thinking about what the experience will be for the audience member. Music is ineffable in its capacity for experience and meaning. Every piece of music is going to hit someone differently, and I can't account for all of those different experiences of my music. What I can try to do, though, is create beauty in the world with my work. And beauty is kind of a loaded term. But what I mean by that is something that has substance and meaning and aesthetic value. And I definitely am thinking about, as an audience member myself, I'm privileged to be able to sit and hear these pieces performed. I don't want to waste my time with work that is meaningless or unenjoyable to listen to. And I'm sensitive to those issues that audience members sometimes have with modern music, because frankly, I have those issues as well when I go to hear pieces sometimes by great composers, and I'm not really enjoying myself. And I just allow myself that freedom to have that experience. And I think audience members should do the same as well. That time really will determine what pieces ultimately have value and will stick around. All the pieces that we know by Mozart and Beethoven, for each one of those, there were a huge number of works that were performed in their day, and we don't really keep track of them any longer. And I think that time has a good way of kind of determining what's worth our time. History and time has a way of kind of helping us determine what's worth keeping around.
Because I always have a feeling that in classical music listeners they are searching for familiar music and music that the older music that's played many times. But in pop music, the listeners are always searching for new works, so new pieces. So how do you think we can make audience interested in new works by living composers in the classical music world?
I'll come on a little strong here. I think one of the problems is that we're afraid to say that a piece is bad. That sometimes, and I've written pieces that are just bad, but that's the creative process. And I think that one of the issues that we have in classical music is this kind of Theodor Adorno, who is a philosopher who wrote very eloquently about music and with some controversy, but one of the things that he wrote about, which I think is a legitimate kind of concern for us to ponder, is fetishization in music, the fetishizing of celebrity, and also just the idea that classical music is there to give one status. That if I'm a listener of classical music, or if I'm a listener to, hard classical music that is serious and 20th century and dissonant and just difficult to listen to, that somehow legitimizes my creative sophistication, or my sophistication as a cultural person. I think we have to be careful to not fall into those traps, both as composers, musicians, and as audience members, and really, give music time, be patient with music that challenges you. But ultimately, once you've given it that time and you've found that it's left wanting, to not be afraid to move on. That's not the work we should be presenting to new audiences. We should be presenting the work that is truly inspiring, and there is so much fantastic music being written right now. And not all of it by composers who are the most well-known composers. And so I think having the courage to really trust our own instincts, both as audience members and as composers, and write the music that we love to hear, program the music that we love to hear, and do that unashamedly, I guess, that leads us to a place where audiences are going to be inspired by what they hear.
What advice would you give to students who just graduated from college and graduate school? What advice would you give yourself if you were to go back in time?
I've thought a lot about this, actually, and I've talked to a lot of colleagues about this. The first bit of advice I would give is take a long and deep breath and let it out. And understand that you're really just at the beginning of things. And what I mean by this is conservatories, music schools, they are excellent at training us as musicians, as artists in some cases as well. But my experience is that most schools, I think this is changing a little bit, but most schools really don't kind of get into the pragmatic, rubber meets the road, okay, how am I going to make this a life? And notice I didn't say career, I said a life, because you have to be connected to music as being something that is essential to your life. And if it isn't, if it's really about ego, if it's about ambition, I want to win this prize, I want to get that recognition, it's something that will feel, if that's what it's about for you, it can feel exhilarating when you have those successes. But that exhilaration is really short-lived. You need to have a strong connection to why is it that I'm doing this? Why do I spend my time at this? And that needs to be, in a sense, separate from your career development. And the reason I'm framing it that way is that every single break I've had in my career, every opportunity that has come about, whether it's as a commercial sound designer or film music composer or a concert music composition, every single one of those opportunities has come about as a result of me pursuing that thread. It's when I'm not being contrived. It's when I'm not being strategic in terms of trying to develop my career. Now, at the same time, where I think composers and young musicians really need to put a thought into are the pragmatics of living. And, how am I going to structure my life in such a way, if music has to be a part of this, and that's really how it should be. You should have this feeling that I have to do this. And I receive that advice, and I think that's good advice. If it's not an essential thing for you to do, you're going to have more hair and less stress choosing another career path, even after a music degree. This really needs to be something that you have to do. At least for me it has, because you're going to have to find a unique path forward with your unique set of skills to find a way to support yourself as you develop your career. And when I say career, I'm putting more artistic emphasis on that. The other bit of advice that I would give is find mentors. One of the best ways to kind of get legs up in film music, for example, is to find a working, well-known composer who needs an assistant and who can offer advice and you can learn from. And my last bit of advice about being successful in music is be a good person. That has a pragmatic aspect. There's no room for personal nonsense. There's no room for ego. When you get to the upper echelons of things, the best musicians I know are the best people. And everyone can write. Everyone can compose. Everyone can do counterpoint. Everyone can do harmony. So if you aren't a person who is easy to work with, or who is difficult, who is just not kind to other people, that's not something that is really going to be tolerated, at least in most circles. You do get the occasional individual who's very successful, who's maybe not always the nicest person, and that becomes part of their persona. But that's really the exception, in my experience anyway. Be a good person, because this is difficult. It's a difficult path, and that's challenging enough than to be kind of in the trenches with people that you don't really like, who are not very kind to you. Kindness begets kindness. Goodness begets goodness. Generosity begets generosity. And I think that's the most important piece of advice I can give. Be a good person. Hang in there and be a good person.
I like that advice. Drew, thanks a lot for joining us today. Thank you.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure.